Let me start by saying I'm looking forward to the boxing in general this weekend. Some real competitive matchups. We've got Antonio Tarver versus Jonathan Banks tonight, Issei Smith versus Erislande Lara on Friday. Then on the weekend we've got the likes of Furman Bundu, Khan Alexander, Tim Bradley versus Diego Chavez, as well as this fight, Korobov versus Lee, which is one that I've been looking forward to actually. With regards to this fight, when it was initially announced, I was pleased for Andy Lee. I've been a fan of Andy Lee's for quite a long time. I appreciate the way he works stylistically. He's the kind of fighter I enjoy watching, and I thought this was going to be his best opportunity to win a world title. I still agree with that actually. In fact, that's a valid point for both men. You know, we're talking about a middleweight division which has got fighters in it like Golovkin, Cotto, even recently guys like Lemieux, guys like Hassan and Jikam. We've got some decent talents in the middleweight division. For these two to hold the Versatile World title, you know, I mean, this has got to be their best shot at doing that, because realistically, if you draw up your top 10 in the middleweight division, your top 10 fighters at 160 pounds, I wouldn't be including Andy Lee. It's borderline whether I'd be including Korobov. They are both top 20 middleweights, top 25 middleweights certainly, but I believe they're some way away at present from the top of the division, which for me means this is very much the best opportunity to get their hands on a belt and to really take their career in the right direction. Now previously, when this fight was announced, I was very much confident that Andy Lee would get the job done. As I say, I like him stylistically. I think he's got that sort of slick boxer, counter-puncher style, combined with really, really decent power. We saw him coming off a devastating knockout, highlight reel knockout win in his last fight, and I thought, you know, he's with Alan Booth, he's improving, he's knocking guys' spark out like that. He's now got a winnable world title shot. He's going to be more motivated than ever. This is going to unlock huge paydays for him. I'm thinking this is Andy Lee's time. And I still do think if Andy Lee's going to win a world title, it's going to be this weekend. But I must admit, I've changed my opinion on this fight now. And I'm siding with Matt Korobov. My prediction, although I see it as a close fight, is that Matt Korobov will prove victorious. Now I'll go into why in a minute, but let me say that I'm not convinced by Korobov. Not at all. But having taken the fact that I'm an Andy Lee fan out of the equation, having taken the fact that I followed Andy Lee and that I appreciate his style out of the equation, whilst I'm not convinced by Matt Korobov, I think overall I'm less convinced by Andy Lee. A lot of the talk surrounding this fight is that Lee's got a big fight experience. He's been in the, you know, sort of big fights, big occasions, big events, etc. And that this will aid him going into this fight. It's certainly true that Andy Lee has faced overall a better level of opposition. He has faced, you know, opponents on the big stage. He's used to the limelight a bit more. Potentially that could have an adverse effect on Matt Korobov. I can't deny that. What I would say is if you look down Andy Lee's resume, and this is probably why I say that I don't really think he constitutes a top 10 middleweight, there is a lack of names on his resume who he's actually beaten. Don't get me wrong, he's got okay form. He's a credible fighter. He's there or thereabouts for a level. But who has Andy Lee actually beaten to suggest he's a top 10 middleweight? His losses have come when he stepped up in class against Brian Vera. I know he returned, you know, perhaps we should ignore the Brian Vera loss. The first loss was in 2008 and he won a rematch convincingly a lot more recently. But when he stepped up to fight Julio Cesar Chavez, who's a guy, again, I know he's very highly rated, but I have huge doubts on after the Sergio Martinez fight. When he stepped up, he was beaten and stopped by Chavez Jr. So my thought process is both guys are in their 30s. If I'm honest, with the depth of talent at middleweight at present, I don't see Andy Lee being a real top 5 middleweight. I just don't see it. I think there's too many guys out there. I think Lee's been exposed when he's fought at the top level before. He's been stopped twice. Defensively, he's quite open. And I just don't think he's quite cutting the mustard at middleweight. I don't think he's big enough. I don't think his defence is strong enough. And if I'm brutally honest, I don't think he's got the overall class and pedigree required to be a top 5 middleweight. I just think he's one of the guys who falls slightly short. And this is, as I say, I'm a fan of him stylistically. He's got that sort of quite attractive technical counter-punching style with sort of decent power behind it. I like that. I followed him. I just don't think he's quite there. I think the other worry, and this is something that Adam Booth laid down massively in a recent IFL TV interview, but the plan with Andy Lee was to fight at 154. Let's not forget this. Let's not let Adam Booth tell us otherwise. We know the plan with Andy Lee was for him to fight at light middleweight. He's not a big middleweight. We're in a time at the minute where some of the middleweights coming to the ring will be, absolutely blowing up before a fight. Look at Chavez Jr., look at Marco Antonio Rubio. They put on masses of weight between a weigh-in and between fight night. Andy Lee's a guy who can comfortably make light middleweight, and that was the plan. Now we know Andy Lee carries power. I don't dispute that he carries power. But the devastating knockout that we saw in his last fight was at 154, not 160, so against a much smaller man. We should remember this. Whilst his knockout percentage is good, there's also a suggestion that he isn't quite as devastating as a Golovkin or as a Lemieux at 160. I mean, recently Anthony Fitzgerald took him a 10-round distance in a fight, the same Anthony Fitzgerald who was blown out in 30 seconds by a much lesser known Irish middleweight, Spike O'Sullivan. The point is, for me, that Andy Lee is a hard puncher. He's clearly an above average, strong puncher. But he's not a world level puncher, especially in a division that has Golovkin, that has Lemieux, etc, etc. We then got to consider Matt Korobov. Matt Korobov's arguably his most impressive piece of form is against Derek Edwards, who he stopped in the 9th round, I believe. Derek Edwards now campaigns at super middleweight. He's been in with the likes of Adonis Stevenson. He's billed next to fight Andre Durrell in a super middleweight final eliminator. He stopped super middleweight prospect Badou Jack in 1 round. Floyd Mayweather's super middleweight prospect Badou Jack, he stopped in 1 round. Billed to fight Andre Durrell next. Record of 27-3. A genuine super middleweight these days. This is a tough guy. This is a guy who's bigger than Korobov, bigger than Lee. This is a guy who's stopping genuine super middleweights in 1 round. Yet against Korobov, not only did Korobov, not get KO'd like a super middleweight in Badou Jack, but he also was able to force the stoppage against his opponent. Now, I'm not saying Derek Edwards is a world beater. I expect Andre Durrell to do a really good job on him. But Derek Edwards is clearly a dangerous opponent. He's clearly a big man, certainly compared to Andy Lee. Derek Edwards is now at 168. Andy Lee is coming up from 154. And we've seen how Matt Korobov can deal with an opponent with that level of power, who can stop a super middleweight in 1 round. So I don't buy in necessarily to the fact that Andy Lee's going to be able to get the stoppage against Korobov. Korobov's amateur background is spectacular. I think I read an article the other day where it was 300 wins, 12 losses. He's got the technical pedigree. He knows his way around the ring. He may not have had experience at the top level, but professionally, but he's a very experienced guy in total. And if I'm honest, whilst Korobov isn't the biggest puncher either, I view this as a fight that will go to points. And with that in mind, I question whether Andy Lee's slight defensive frailties and the occasions where you see him taking too much punishment and see him as quite easy to catch could be the downside in this fight. I think we're certainly right when we say that Korobov hasn't proved himself at a top level in a professional ring. But if we're honest, neither has Andy Lee. He's been around the scene for a long time. He's been involved in big fights. It doesn't get much bigger than fighting Chavez Jr. But he's not been successful in these fights. He hasn't beaten the top 5 middleweights, the top 10 middleweights. The plan for him wasn't even to be fighting at this weight. Essentially, what we've got here is a guy who's failed before when he stepped up to the world title level, fighting out of his first choice weight division, in my opinion, against an unbeaten opponent with a superb amateur pedigree, who appears to be both defensively capable and durable. For me, the way Andy Lee's going to win this is via points, and I think I would consider him the smaller man, and I would consider him being the more hittable of the two. So whilst I am an Andy Lee fan, whilst I've followed his career, and whilst, as I say, I really do appreciate his style, and whilst I do genuinely believe this is his best chance to win a world title belt, I'm going to go for Korobov. I hope I'm wrong. I hope Lee wins. I'd love to see him as a world champion, but it's going to be a tough fight for him. It's not a confidence selection. I'm not fully convinced by Korobov, but I've got more reason to doubt Lee at this point. And I think the other thing to factor in is that with Lee, we kind of know he's not going to, well, in my opinion, we know he's probably not going to be a pound for pound fighter, top middleweight in the world, that sort of level. Whereas with Korobov, the potential is slightly more unclear, which I suppose you get with any unbeaten fighter. And I guess also, being brutally honest, Korobov may not have to be a world beater to get the job done against Andy Lee. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts on this fight. On Korobov, probably points or late stoppage.